So, what is the significance of the populists and the Gilded Age protest movements? The populists were only around for about 6 years, and after the election of 1896, they're gone. Partly because they had fused with the Democrats, and so they were sucked into the Democratic Party, and also because the economy improved for everyone. Well, for all sorts of reasons. There was grain issues in Europe, so prices went up, but also the supply of gold in the United States went up like 400, 500% because we had found gold in Alaska. So the things the populists were really upset about, they were kind of fixed anyway. So why exactly did the populists matter then? A couple of reasons. First and foremost is what this election represented economically, and that is the past and the future. McKinley, was the Republicans, they represented basically urban areas, or urban America. Banking, manufacturing, industry, big cities. Bryan and the Democrats, they represented the past, an agricultural-based economy. And they said they're for the people, all the people, but they were, like, in a lot of big cities, even laborers voted Republican. And it's because, what do they, populists want to raise farm prices. It's just going to cost more for people in cities. So this is the tangible example of creative destruction, that process we talked about before. Populists were trying to stop progress, and it just doesn't work. You cannot stop progress. You cannot stop economic and technological revolutions once they've begun. And so in that sense, the Populist Party, they were going to lose because of that. Second major significance is there is a huge realignment of the parties. The election of 1896 is always called one transformative election, where it changes the nature of the two political parties, and did it in all sorts of ways. The Republicans overwhelmingly got cities, especially in the Northeast, most of the major cities in the Northeast, and even areas that had voted Democratic before voted Republican now. And so the Republican Party will change. It's a little thing, but Catholics overwhelmingly voted Republican, and Protestants voted Democrat, which that's usually reversed. So there's that, but the most important one is the Democratic Party will be the party of reform in this election. They were the party of reform, and that will continue. Since the Civil War, the Democrats had been the party of, they called themselves the Conservative Party. They had stood for laissez-faire, and they had just been supported small government conservative ideas. And this is one of the elections that starts to change that process, to make the Democratic Party the party that today is considered the party of reform. So that is the second significance. Third, this election shows what happens to third parties. Third, people always complain that we only have two parties in this country, and that's true. And it's because whenever a third party comes along, one of the two major parties just sucks them up. They usually get rid of the really radical stuff and then take on the other parts. And so the United States, our political parties, in spite of all the rhetoric, are not nearly as radical historically as people think significance when you compare it to other places in the world. When you compare it to other places in the world, they're really radical. Our two parties tend to be, not currently, but they tend to be much closer together than most people would like to admit. So, what does this all mean? To summarize the Gilded Age protest as a whole, there is a concept that is important to understand. During the Gilded Age, everything is changing, and overall, the economy of the United States, it is skyrocketing. Remember, from 1870 to 1890, it's the most economic growth any country has ever seen in that short period of time in history. So the economy is doing well overall, but there were a lot of people, and when I say a lot, a majority of the people in the United States were not doing well, especially when compared to the insane wealth of part of the population. If you remember what Marx said would happen in the capitalist system, the proletariat will feel so abused that they will rise up in revolution and overthrow the system. There is an important concept to know about this. It's called the revolution of rising expectations. And it's also called the Davies curve of the economist James Davies, the J curve. And what this points out is that revolutions don't actually happen because everyone's poor. When everyone's poor, you don't get revolutions. You get revolutions when the economy is doing better and better and better. And so there's an expectation that people are going to do better, but the reality doesn't meet that expectation. That's why income inequality, if it gets too extreme, it's dangerous for everyone. Because if you have part of the population getting insanely wealthy, and you have a bigger part of the population, the majority of the population that is barely scraping by, then the gap between those two, that is what's dangerous. Revolutionary movements don't occur because everyone's poor. They occur because the standard of living is going up, and individuals' expectations of how they're going to do is going up, but the reality doesn't live up to their expectations. And it's not even that they're necessarily doing worse, it's just they perceive themselves as doing worse compared to the other part of the population. It is like a relative doing worse. So it's relative to the people that are doing better. Revolution of rising expectations, it turns out it just has a lot of evidence for it. The Russian Revolution, French Revolution, Mexican Revolution, they were actually started by a more middle class that wanted to be doing better, even the American Revolution. So, Marx, what he said will end up being true. Because so many people were doing bad, because so many people were struggling, this led directly to the creation of the Socialist Party of America. It was founded by Debs right after the Pullman strike, and it'll run in 1901, and at its height, it'll get more than 1 million votes. That is a lot of people that are saying the capitalist system is not working. So the Gilded Age, great overall, but it left a lot of people behind, and those people started supporting radical ideas. Economic inequality does. That's why today, currently in 2024, we are seeing the rise of political extremism. We have been seeing the rise for a lot of reasons, but the economic inequality that we have now is worse than it was during the Gilded Age. Debs and a lot of Americans were so mad that they will call for something very drastic. And the Socialist Party of America, it is really important to know, for one, because of what I just said, what it represents. A lot of Americans being very dissatisfied and following along in what Marx called for. Other reason the Socialist Party is really important is because it will gain the attention of some very important Americans, some very middle class and upper class Americans that the socialists scared the living hell out of. And those Americans will start calling for reform, which is what we will get to next time with the Progressive Party.